of Wooden Boat magazine. And Jon and I are going to discuss this afternoon the origins of Wooden Boat and his influences. And before we get into that, I've known this story for a while. I've been with the magazine for 27 or so years.
You were a mere child.
Since I was a mere child, but I must say that the longer I'm in this business, the more incredible the story seems to me, that somebody can, with no experience in magazines, is that right, Jon?
That is, that is really
no experience
right.
in magazines at the time can
Yeah.
have an idea and launch it on a shoestring budget in a cabin in the woods with a phone nailed to a tree a half mile down the road, and grow it by 10,000 readers a year for a decade, and 45 plus years later, still have it clinging to its core values.
Yeah, I mean, it says a lot for the people who have been the faithful customers and subscribers all these years, and it says a lot for the people who have worked here, yourself included, you know, about how much the value of that principle matters. I do love that. And you want me to just launch right into it? Because
well, I would, but I'd like to know. Yeah, I mean, if you sent me some photos, and may we start with Jack Jakes, who I believe was a big influence for you.
He definitely was. He definitely.
And here's Jake, and I'm just going to hide myself for a moment while you tell us a little about Jack.
So Jack, I mean, he was really in terms of wooden boats. It's fair to say that without Jack, without my having worked for Jack at Dutch Wharf Boatyard in Brantford, which is still going all these years later and still focused on wooden boats, being run by Jack's son, Paul. If it had not been for Jack, whom I went to work for in the fall of, I'm trying to think, I think it was 65, yeah. Just as a yard hand. I was lucky enough to stumble onto this yard and this job because it was in Brantford, it is in Brantford, Connecticut, near Stony Creek, where I had grown up part of the summer in the Thimble Islands. And so just to back up a half step, I had tried college. I just was not college material. And I didn't really want to study. I didn't know why I was there. And I didn't know why I should stay there. I'd grown up on that campus, University of Rhode Island. And so there was good reason for me to want to get out of there. But Jack, as I say, I stumbled into this yard. And when I was there, I found his belief in and commitment to wooden boats and yachts was really awe-inspiring to me. And I loved boats, but I basically loved all boats. And it was only under his tutelage that I came to appreciate the genius that wooden boats and yachts kind of embody. And so I worked for him for several years as a yard hand, and I sort of grew into becoming a boat carpenter. We did a lot of repair work on fine wooden yachts, a lot of German built and Danish built and City Island built yachts. Came to Dutch Wharf for work because Dutch Wharf had a high reputation for doing great work. And I had the privilege of working alongside those guys who were such amazing mechanics, as Francis Herreshoff called them. They were really amazing men. But Jack's commitment to those boats absolutely informed my interest in and passion for wood in boats. And again, this is that picture that you have up is from a piece that we did in issue, I think that was issue 60, on surveying. And that is so typically Jack. That is his look. I mean, he was just very committed to this stuff. And so he's basically saying, as the caption says, anybody who sees that issue can see that, you know, this was in the days of people surveying boats with jackknives, which is just crazy. So his big thing was just put your jackknife away and sound the hull and timbers with a hammer, just a light hammer. You'll learn a lot just listening to that sound, which is absolutely true. But Jack, just to reiterate, I mean, without him, I, I would not have started Wooden Boat magazine, period. End of story. It was his influence that changed my appreciation for it, my feel for it, my passion for it. That was the beginning. So it was the foundation in a way for my getting going.
And to mix metaphors, what was the spark then? I mean, there are a lot of young people who go to work in boatyards and are passionate about the craft.
Yeah.
But what brought you to start a magazine?
Yeah. So this is so starting the magazine. After working for Dutch Wharf, I did a few other. I worked as a Finnish carpenter for a while. Then I ended up working at Hurricane Island at the Outward Bound School, taking care of the boats for a couple of years. And I see that now you've got me as a boat builder, which when I was looked like I was 14 and weighed maybe 94 pounds. So I basically ended up becoming a small boat builder, a small person building boats and a builder of small boats. I wanted to build, finely finished traditional boats. That was the niche I wanted to occupy. And when I built this boat for a friend named Robert Faulkner, who lived in Oklahoma and who now lives in the Blue Hill area, I realized during the course of that construction, which was sort of 1973, this was in Pembroke, Maine. I'd started a shop in Pembroke. I realized that I was an okay builder, but not a great builder. I wasn't really fast. I could do good work, but I couldn't do it really fast the way some people could. And I thought, one of the things I could do is try and advance this whole idea of wooden boats, because they were going extinct. I mean, it was clear to me that they were going extinct. They would be relegated to the corners of yards. And I just thought that was wrong. Hinckley was really in its ascendancy. All the glass boat manufacturers were, doing well, were thriving. And I just thought, we can't let this happen. And it's not like I'm a radical about this. I just wanted to slow the process of extinction down, as I've said many times. And so I thought, well, I could start a newsletter. I would start a newsletter just for builders. And the builders would, read this and they'd say, well, this worked for me and this didn't work for me. I just thought if we could just sort of form a fraternity of people who are building these things and sharing our challenges, we might be able to advance our own practice a little bit. It soon became clear that that would never work. Most builders didn't want to share their secrets. I understood that. And I thought, well, why don't I just start a magazine? And you have to appreciate how naively I asked this question. I mean, I had no idea what I was thinking about. I just thought, why not? And one of the reasons why not is because magazines were a home place for me. I was not a good book learner at the time. I didn't like books. I didn't like what they asked of me because my experience with most books was I'm going to have to take a test on the content of this book, and I don't want to do that. So magazines, I felt comfortable reading them. I felt comfortable being with them, being in them, being of them. And so starting a magazine seemed like that was an idea that I thought I could make work. And again, not in any arrogant way. I just thought, well, honestly, it's a joke now, but I thought, what could go wrong? And if only I'd known. Well, if I'd known, I never would have done it, because, a lot of things can go wrong. You can really go through a lot of money fast. So the idea was, I can only build a few boats in my life, but if I could get a few thousand people interested in this subject together,
and
maybe
that's what you imagined.
A few thousand, yeah. I mean, I thought my assumption, my dream assumption was that I could find 10,000 people who cared about this stuff. I thought, somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 people they will be the readers of Wooden Boat. And so that was what I thought. My wildest dream was 30,000, but that was so out of the realm of possibility. So
you didn't start a newsletter. You started a glossy magazine.
I
And
did, and yeah, and the newsletter wasn't going to work, and I knew it pretty soon. I just needed to sort of think about that first. And the only thing that existed at that time in the um, wooden boat and yacht area was classic David Kasanov's newsletter.
right,
Yeah, was it called Classic Boat?
or classic
Embarrassing.
boating, or yeah,
I can't remember. Embarrassingly.
mhm.
So anyway, John Gardner's photograph is up there, and John figures in this because before I went to Pembroke and built those boats, including the one that there was the picture of me standing in the stern of, John and I had corresponded about the kind of the idea. This is in the 1970. I'm working at Hurricane Island, and John is working at Mystic as the small craft curator. And you know, he was an amazing man, and another very important mentor for me. You know, he wrote pieces for National Fisherman. He was just a towering scholar. He really was an amazing man, and yet he was also a shipbuilder, a yacht builder. He could do fine work. He could hew heavy timbers with a broad axe. He could, you know, finish the finest piece of cabinetry with a fine plane. And he'd grown up in Calais, which is not far from where Pembroke is in Maine. And we shared this kind of Washington County understanding and experience. Washington County is really, truly the end of the earth in Maine. I mean, you can see the end of the earth from there. So we would correspond about that. And our relationship, our corresponding relationship and our in-person relationship lasted for years. But the important thing about John, as sort of in addition to the influence that Jack Jakes had on me, was that John lived the idea of being a scholar and a craftsman, and sort of a better world person. He lived all those things. He was an extraordinary man. And so when I said I'd like to start this magazine, you know, he understood that ideas in print could really make a difference. And that has continued to be true, as we know. But one of the things he didn't like was that I was committed to glossy paper, color pictures, high quality. And it was very important to me that I be able to make the magazine be on really fine stock, be legitimate. I did not want it to be a newsprint rag. I wanted it to be something that stood for itself. I wanted people to look at it and go, oh my God, this is really a commitment. That turned out to happen, and it happened kind of in spades. But John never liked that idea. He always thought I should be doing this in a much simpler black and white way. So just, if I may just digress slightly, Marianne Stetz took that picture. Anybody who remembers John Gardner, he was a wonderful man, but anybody who remembers interacting with him, he was kind of a little bit curmudgeonly. I mean, his demeanor was serious, and he was a serious man. It wasn't that he was without humor, but all his interactions were serious. And it was the hardest thing was to get John to smile for a photograph. So Marianne Stetz, the genius photographer at Mystic Seaport, goes to take this portrait for the article that we had on John in that issue. I think that was issue 40. Anyway, wonderful article. But Marianne has to make John smile. And at the time, John doesn't want to smile for the camera, even for Marianne, whom I'm sure he loves. But she couldn't get him to smile. So she said this is the story she told me. The way I got him to smile was, I told him that if he would, she was pregnant at the time, maybe 8 months, maybe more, but very pregnant at the time. And she said, so I said to John, if you smile, if you'll let me take this picture and smile for the camera, I'll show you my belly button, which was protruding at the time, as any pregnant mothers would. And that was the smile that came, that, anybody who remembers John can remember his laugh. And of course he laughed, and that was the picture she got. And that, that may be one of the greatest pictures of John Gardner ever made, and Marianne Stetz made it. And I love that image. And so anyway, sorry, I could go on for hours. You'll have to, I'll need a shepherd's crook here to get me out of here. So.
Well, that's great. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
And so obviously you rented a building in downtown Manhattan and rented some ferns and some furniture.
Doesn't everyone?
Yeah. So you worked out of a one-room cabin in Brooksville.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yep. So so we built this after we got the first issue out. We sent the first issue to the printer and got going. We built this small cabin in North Brooksville, and as the true legend says, there was no electricity, no running water, no phone, and the phone was indeed down on the road, which was actually 3/4 of a mile from the cabin. We like being in the woods, but anyway, that picture of me at the Smith Corona typewriter, our first word processor, was, that's true fact. There's me talking on the phone that was in a weather-tight box fastened to this old white pine tree right along the road, right along Route 176 in North Brooksville. And we owned a bunch of land there, a lot of cedar on that land, which is one of the reasons I bought it. But so the phone is like 12 feet from the road. And I'll never forget the time a neighbor was walking by. She told me later, she said, I was walking by your land there, and all of a sudden the phone rang from behind the tree. And I thought, what is going on? And, so it was that kind of legendary stuff. But we worked out of the house. And one of the interesting kind of cautionary tales about this was there was a magazine that had started about that same time called On the Sound, which was a Long Island sound magazine. It was glossy, and I learned from a source that they had invested in very fancy office space on Long Island, and that they had tried to make this magazine work, and they went out of business fast. And it was so telling to me, not that I could have afforded fancy office space, but it set a tone for me that made me understand that we could, just by trying to sort of fluff up our kind of quarters, we could screw everything up. We could make this business fail just by failing to realize that we need to operate very, very simply. Now, that's a basic lesson for anybody, but I had not been in business before. I'd worked for people since I was about 12, but that's all I had done was work for people. So taking this step into my own business was a different kettle of fish. Where am I, Matt?
You are. So you started this magazine, and you're chugging along, and everything's going well, and this happened.
Oh yeah. So this was 1977. This is a kind of a heartbreaking. It's kind of heartbreaking. Woof. It's heartbreaking to see this image, because this was a tough time. So this is March of 1977. Now it's 3 years, almost 3 years later. We've moved the magazine out of our house, and we're occupying an old Cape Cod style house in South Brooksville, which is no longer there. The house is no longer there. Obviously, South Brooksville is. The one night in March of '77, the neighbor called me to say that somebody had broken into the office building, and this was like midnight. So I go down there, and he and I look at it, and I call the deputy sheriff. The deputy sheriff comes down. We look at it. The deputy says, in the presence of this neighbor, "Well, tomorrow we'll come and get fingerprints." So we all go home, and 2 hours later, the same neighbor calls me and tells me that the house is on fire. And so I go down there, call the fire department, go down there. Well, of course, the building, it wasn't completely burned to the ground, but almost. And all of the work that we had done for issue 16, March, April of 1977, was destroyed. We had to start over again. But the raw material for that was not destroyed. So what happened was, these are the stairs to my office. A couple of us work in the upstairs of that house. And at this time, I think there were 4 or 5 of us working on the magazine. And so we had to basically start the issue all over again. It was not a lot of people said, well, are you going to continue? Well, of course I'm going to continue. We have now, by the spring of 1977, we must have had, well, maybe 25,000 readers, which was unheard of, because we had, like, at the end of the first year, we reached about 9,000, and then it grew by about 10,000 a year. So this is early 77, so early in the third year. And so this was, something was really happening. And there was a commitment. I mean, first of all, we owed these subscribers who were basically financing the magazine, we owed them issues. We couldn't, if we didn't give them issues, we were going to have to give them money to pay back the unearned part of their subscriptions. That's the way subscription business works. So there wasn't any question of stopping, but we had to move around. We were really like Dust Bowl victims in a way, and not to take anything away from the trauma of that, but we were constantly on the move. People would lend us places to work for a few weeks, which we did, and finally we ended up in a what used to be called the Flagpole Factory in South Brooksville, and we did that. And then we were offered this place in Brooklyn, which is where the student house is now, and we made the move over there. But all of that was a very transitional time between the fire in issue 16 and issue 18, which came out in the fall. We changed the logo. We introduced the graphic that has now become kind of famous, of that Viking ship logo, which had been just a sketch on a piece of yellow lined paper in the beginning. And I had a couple of illustrated versions of that going forward, but we had been selling back issues, and we wanted to sell T-shirts, and because we needed revenue. So we changed the logo. A guy named George Spindler worked that logo up from a sketch that I provided him, and did a beautiful job. Obviously, it is one of the most, to me, iconic small business logos in the world. I mean, because a lot of people, we still hear from people who go, I saw somebody with a wooden boat hat on in Rio de Janeiro or Stockholm or Johannesburg. I mean, it's amazing the camaraderie that logo has inspired. And I meet up with somebody in an airport and I go, oh my God, great hat or great shirt, or anyway. So.
And did you develop that for the T-shirts first, or were you looking for a company brand too?
So what I had sketched was the same theme, the Viking ship theme. There was something about it that really, really resonated for me. I wanted that theme, but I had in the archives is this old illustration of that somebody did for me, taking my idea and making a kind of a ship. It's more of an illustration of a lapstrake plank Viking ship from head on. So we needed something more iconic. And actually, George Spindler, who lived in Trenton near us, he had been a graphic designer, advertising-oriented graphic designer, and he was a friend of a friend. I knew him, and I said, would you try this? And that's what he came up with. And I mean, and he also changed the wooden boat type. It had been called the Wooden Boat, and it was kind of I remember, I think it was a Baskerville early on. I used to know all these things by heart. Anyway, so he changed the type to what it is now. I mean, it hasn't changed much from what we changed it to in 1977. But yeah, we needed that iconic look. We needed something we could put on T-shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you left Brooksville and tacked your way to Brooklyn, and you moved into what is now Mountain Ash, the student house.
The student house.
And down the road from there was this. And you've called this the impossible dream.
Yeah.
You've named the file.
Yeah. How do we say that? How do we describe this? I mean, if anyone has seen, I mean, we were in this like hovel in Brooksville, and Joel White and Maynard Bray came over and said, we got an offer that you can't refuse. I didn't want to move to Brooklyn. I didn't want to move the business to Brooklyn. I loved Brooksville. So they moved us, they brought me over. The deal was impossible to pass up. So I bought that, what the old Mountain Ash Inn, which is now the WoodenBoat School student house. And we worked there. It was wonderful. We had to put some money into it, but it was wonderful. We worked there for 3 years. And then we were starting to outgrow it. So I went to the bank and asked if we could borrow some money to expand that building. And the president of the bank, who had become a friend because he'd lent me money a few times and I'd paid it back, he's, to my surprise, said, "No, I won't lend you more money on this building." And I couldn't believe it. It's 1980, and I'm thinking, we broke even in 1979. Come on, Bob, we're a going concern. We're a real business now. We make a profit. And he said, "I get it, but no, no. If you find another place that we could maybe do a mortgage on, we'll be glad to talk with you about that, but not on this building." So I was unable to expand the Mountain Ash building and now forced to look for something else. Well, by chance, a subscriber and his wife, I'll put it that way, a couple came in from Maryland looking for property. And, I didn't know what was for sale or anything, but one of the people who worked in the office, Lorna, said, "Well, there's a place down the road for sale." And nobody in the office knew that I was now going to have to find another place if we were going to expand. And we needed to expand. We were outgrowing the building. So she told them about this place where we are now, where the picture is. And, she said it's a lot of land and a bunch of buildings. And they said, no, we just want a small piece of land on the water that we can build our own building on. So they leave. And I say to Lorna, "Where is this place? Because I'm interested." So she tells me it's down the road. I'd never been in here. I came down here on a Friday in early June. It's a northwest day, high cumulus clouds and bright sun and very quiet. At that time, there was a cable across the driveway. It was really a narrow driveway at the time. I walk in and I come to the place where you can you can go left up to the office or right to the shops or straight down to the water. And I cannot believe where I am. It is absolutely silent. It is absolutely paradise. And I'm going, who knew this was even here? So obviously some people did, but not me. So I then spent some time looking for who owned it and what it was for sale for, and we couldn't afford it. And I knew we couldn't afford it. So we thought about, well, maybe we could buy it with somebody and split it up. And now a month, maybe 2 months later, the owner, who was in somewhat straitened circumstances, was notified by the mortgage holder that they were going to foreclose on him if he didn't get his payment schedule squared away. With so then he calls his real estate agent, whom I'd talked with, and says, "What do I do?" And the real estate agent said, "Well, you have to lower your price." And so he said, "Okay." So they lowered the price. The real estate agent, for some reason, calls me and tells me it's available at a much lower price. And I'm going, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do this. So I go up with some earnest money to the real estate agent's office, and he submits the offer, and lo and behold, the owner accepts it. It's like a third of the asking price. And it's 60 acres with that building, the office, which is now our office building, the old house that had been built in 1916. It's brick and concrete with a slate roof. There's a barn that's brick and concrete with a slate roof. There's an old farmhouse that was here, owned, I think, built by the Babson or Batchelder families when they were living here. The Babson family settled this in the 1700s. And then there's a boathouse and the remains of a pier down on the shore. Well, it's like, it is heaven. I mean, it could not have been more perfect for us, as you know, having worked here all these years. And so we managed to pull it off. There were many people, who thought that's probably the last dumb thing that Jon has done, because by the time the first payment comes due, he's not going to be able to make it. We're not going to have jobs. And I can't tell you that I knew that we could do this, but I thought we could. I hoped we could, and we did. I mean, it took a long time. It was very painful for a while, but this is where we've ended up. And that allowed us to start the school in 1981. And
that was a long-standing dream of yours, no?
It was.
And I'm going to jump back a little in your narrative timeline, but to bring up somebody who is significant to this next phase of the story.
Yeah, indeed. So Peter Anderhagen, that's little Jon Wilson on the left, and Peter Anderhagen on the right. I love this picture in part because my semester and a half at the University of Rhode Island, where I'd basically grown up, that all I got from that semester and a half, because I put nothing into it, was this sweatshirt. So that's not terrible. Peter Anderhagen had been a friend for years. He had been a friend of my older brother, and he and I became friends. He was an intellectual mentor of mine. The way he thought about things was nothing like the way I thought about things. And I thought that was pretty cool. I wanted to be more like that. I did not have the intellectual candle power to think like he did or does. But anyway, he and I had become friends. So this is him and me at Dutch Wharf. That's Dutch Wharf Courtyard in Brantford, a Riano senior behind us, and that Crocker Polestar. Was she a catch? Yeah, we had a number of great wooden boats at Dutch Wharf. And anyway, so Peter has just stopped by to say hello, and somebody grabbed that photo. By the time I was ready to start the school, which is now, that was taken in probably 1965 or 66. I'm not sure which. So by the time I started the school during the winter of 1980-81, when we were fixing up this building because it needed some rehabbing and preparing to start the school in the summer of 1981, Peter was the person, because he was an educator, because he understood something about experiential education. He didn't have a background in boats, but he did understand education. And he's a fascinating, charismatic guy. And, he was a perfect guy to be the initiating director of the WoodenBoat School. I mean, he really made it possible to get the thing started in the way that it did. We offered 10 classes that first summer of 1981, and we had 75 people sign up.
And was the original idea for continuing education for professionals?
No.
Or no?
No, it was to provide a three-dimensional experiential translation or interpretation of what WoodenBoat magazine was trying to do. So it was the sort of the three-dimensional practical application of the things that were being discussed in WoodenBoat. And WoodenBoat, at the time, this was serious business. We had a commitment to making the magazine advance the genius of WoodenBoat design and construction. And we were starting, at about the time that adhesives were advancing fast, and cold molded construction using modern adhesives was advancing fast, so that we could cover both traditional construction and design and modern construction and design. And so I don't know why I mentioned that, but I needed to mention it in some contextual continuum. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought on that. But the magazine's mission, I wanted it to be expressed in three dimensions for those. I have to say that it was modeled on what used to be called the Maine Photographic Workshops in Rockport, which David Lyman has started, and which brought master photographers to Rockport, where anybody who could basically pass the, if there was a juried entrance process, it wasn't very robust. I mean, not almost anybody, but people who were accomplished amateurs could go to the Maine Photographic Workshops and work alongside truly accomplished masters. That model was what I wanted to replicate with the WoodenBoat School, and that's what we did. So we had master boat builders come in, and we worked for a week or two with people who really cared about this, and it was so cool. I mean, I'm as proud of the school as of anything. And it continued to work well. It has continued to work well. So just to return, there was that first year we had 10 classes and 75 people came. Now this year, I think it was, I don't know the exact total, but I think it's around 100 classes that we have offered, and around 700 or 750 people would be attending these classes. As it happens, the COVID-19 crisis has got us rethinking everything. We're constrained severely now, and we're not sure what we can do. we've already had to cancel part of the season. We have to face this question because we can't bring people from all over the country and the world into this little community if we can't test people. I mean, that's the problem, where the absence of the ability to test prevents us from bringing everybody in. But this would be the 40th season if we can conduct it. And that, I mean, think of that, 40 years of the Wooden Boat School. And this is 46 years of Wooden Boat Magazine.
And our returning student rate is, do you know it offhand, John?
It is
close
around
to
50%. It has varied between 45 and 50%. And which it says a lot about the instructors who are here. It says a lot about Rich and Kim, who are really the head and horns of that operation.
Rich Hilsinger and Kim Sexton, and Rich has been director for three plus decades now.
Yeah, right. That's right. So after Peter Anderhagen, Ben Ellison was the director for a while, and then Rich took the job on, and as I'm happy to say, I never want Rich to retire, but of course we're all getting old. So yeah, it has been working beautifully as far as I'm concerned, and part of it is this campus, which is still amazing. My jaw drops most days when I drive in here, except in the dead of winter. Then it just clenches. But people love this place, and they also love this community. I mean, yourself, the community that we operate in Brooklyn is amazing. The people here truly appreciate those who come here, and those who come here truly appreciate those who live here. And that isn't the case in every school. For example, one of Rockport's early problems was that none of the people in Rockport cared much for the people who were coming to the classes, because they were bringing a kind of arrogance and specialness we're here for the photography workshops, not to be in this little town. It's quaint, but they called them in those days the blue dots, because remember when there were blue dot flash bulbs? Mm-hmm. That was how they got thus named. And that, it was, nobody did anything about that here. It's just that this is an amazing community of people, some of whom have been here for generations. And it's amazing. And it's an amazing community of students, some of whom have been coming here for decades. It's awe-inspiring to me. And that
it is. I mean, one of the incredible things is that the core of students who return each year to commission the campus and boats.
Yeah, the alumni returning just to do that, just to help us get ready, without whom we could not do it. So, yeah.
And so around that time too, there was another initiative, the Nutshell Pram.
Oh yeah. This was really important to me. Of course, so I'm so biased. So this is in 1984. Joel White had, we'd done some how to build articles with the Catspaw dinghy. That was the first one, that the sort of an amplification of the Columbia tender. And he had developed something he called the Martha's tender, which he had designed for his father's boat called Martha. And he was interested in plywood engineering in small boats and making it simpler. And I was really interested in developing a design that could be rowed and towed and sailed and sculled and built in a kit form, as in good quality plywood, Brunswick mahogany plywood at the time. And Joel was very interested in designing a much more simplified hull form. And the Nutshell Pram, which became our first kind of originated design, was intentionally designed for that purpose. And so he designed it. I remember he carved a block of white pine the first time he did it, it was a lovely thing. And he built that boat, and the bottom was a little narrow for my taste. I felt if we're going to make this available to all kinds of people with all kinds of experience. We want to make sure that this is a safe boat. And that first boat with its narrow bottom, which made it quicker, was also a little less stable for my taste. So that Maynard Bray took that boat and named it Sarah's Swallow for his daughter Sarah. And I asked Joel to design one with a little bit wider bottom. So he built this, and that is what this is. This is actually the very first nutshell. This is the first true nutshell. This is the number one of what became the design, and that's my son Seth. I basically had it designed for my son Seth. My older son Chris had a Jimmy Steele Peapod, which he rode and sailed. But so Seth is about 8 in that picture, and this is the smaller, the 7.5 footer, and it's a great boat. You can see if you look closely, at that point the mast partners is a separate fixture. It was spruce, and the mast. Joel wasn't sure how much stress the mast and sail could take if it were partnered at the thwart level. So he put this additional partner in. This was a bolt-in partner, removable if you wanted it, above where the mast goes through, and then down to the step. It turned out not to be needed, but we were glad we might as well try it, and it was a good step. But so for me, that was WoodenBoat's first real foray into providing kits, which now the WoodenBoat store, which is a going concern at this point, we'd have the kits cut locally. They would ship them up. Scott and the crew would, they went through hell and high water to make this process work, and they still do. But this was a very significant stage for us, where we have a boat that we believe is extraordinarily suited to rowing, towing, sculling, sailing, and on some boats you could put it upside down on the trunk cabin. If you got a big enough cruising boat, you could take it aboard. So this was the start, and we did a video of it, and that's like I was like a kid in those days, and but it was it is a significant milestone for us. And then we went on. Joel designed a 9'6" version, and it's a better boat because it's a bigger boat. It'll stand up to more. Anyway, and then we have done others that you if you looked at the WoodenBoat store catalog or at the WoodenBoat plans books, a lot of them are featured in there. But it's that first collaboration in this way with Joel was so much fun. And he told me, he designed a lot of boats and built a lot of boats, and he would get a royalty check when the plans came in, when the plans sold. And he said that receiving that tiny little royalty check for the Nutshell Pram was one of his proudest achievements. And that's how he was, because he knew that hundreds and even thousands of people were taking a look at this and thinking about it and building it, and this is something that he carved a model up in his little office up there in the yard at Brooklyn Boat Yard. And
he began with a model for this.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, we've talked a lot about the people who influenced you getting this enterprise going and keeping it going. Yeah. But you have a boat yourself, Free Spirit, Concordia 33.
Yeah.
And around the time I was getting started at WoodenBoat, you were doing significant work to her. And one of the impressive things about that was the forward-thinking nature of that work, that you weren't trying to freeze the tradition, but you were trying to improve this boat in ways and look for new methods to maintain and perpetuate a wooden boat. And right. We have a half model of her here. Could you tell us a little about Free Spirit and the work you did?
Yeah, sure. So she's obviously the larger model there below that Broer Tam sketch of the William Hand, the framed watercolor above. So she was designed by Wilder B. Harris, Bill Harris, when he worked for the Concordia Company. the backstory is that Llewellyn Howland Sr., who was the originator of the Concordia yawl, had had a Cullen Archer cutter named Escape, which went ashore in South Dartmouth, Padenham, in the hurricane of 1938. Immediately after that, and she was lost. So immediately after that, Mr. Howland asked his son Waldo to have a boat design that was kind of reminiscent of Escape, but with better performance qualities. She'd go to windward better. She'd just be she'd be comfortable, but a little faster. And, he, built in a somewhat more modern way. So Bill Harris was the designer at Concordia, or worked for Concordia at the time. And he sketched up basically this design. I mean, which to me is an absolutely exquisite design. And Mr. Howland took a look at it and said, I don't know, I think I'd like something with a little bit longer ends. So Bill, I'm sure painfully, stretched out the ends of this form and created something that I have seen, and it's really awful. It's an awful design. And maybe he just, I don't know. I don't know why. I don't think Bill Harris could have designed a bad-looking boat, except in that case. And so, for whatever reason, Mr. Howland said to Waldo, "Look, this isn't working. Can you find somebody that can, kind of get me what I want?" And so Waldo went to see Ray Hunt, the renowned designer, and asked him to design the lines and sail plan to interpret this longer-ended thing that Mr. Howland Sr. wanted. Ray Hunt designed what became the hull lines for the Concordia 39 and the sail plan. And that was all he did. He just did the sail plan and the hull lines. And then it fell to Bill Harris to develop the plans, the details, and all the drawings for that. And at which, I mean, if anyone has seen those drawings, they are beautifully, beautifully done. The Concordia 39 is a beautiful, beautiful design. So that, then the Concordia, so Escape, later Java, was built, and that started the Concordia yawl line. Meanwhile, this design, the Concordia 33, sits in the plans cabinet until a man named Ferguson comes to Concordia Yard and says, "I'm looking for a weekender. Would you have anything in your stock plans file?" So Waldo pulls out the plans for this, and lo and behold, he loves it, and he has his son work at Palmer Scott, and they build this boat in 1948, which they called Mitty, M-I-T-T-Y, which was the name of Mr. Ferguson's grandson, I think. I'm trying to think I might have that wrong. I think it was his grandson. Anyway, so they built that boat at Palmer Scott's in 1948, and it stayed in the Ferguson family for 10 or 15 years, maybe. Went through another owner or two, and then Giffey Full bought her, and I bought her from Giffey Full in 1982. And I might be like my great-grandfather, who he had something, I think his sloop started out at like 38 on deck, and it ended up at about 60 overall. He had it lengthened twice. And I don't know, it seems like he could have had anything he wanted built, but he wanted to lengthen this boat. Well, I seem to be falling in it. I'm not lengthening the boat, but I actually would think about it. But going back to your question, what I found in this boat was there were things that had been done because they were the custom at the time. For example, hard pine decks. They didn't want, they wanted to build it relatively cheaply. So it was hard pine canvas decks. Well, I mean, it's pretty, hard pine is very stable, but it's heavy. And the canvas will last because it's stable, but it's a heavy deck. And you've got, you're dealing with movement. And so one of the first things I did in 1984 was have Joel White lift the house off and make the cockpit bigger and put a plywood deck on and cover it with Dynel. So I wanted that, I knew that I had to start there. The boat was sound. What we needed to do was make sure we could stabilize that deck surface. So we did. He did. I shouldn't say we did. I was just an onlooker. By that time, I hadn't picked up any tools in a long time, and I didn't even know if I could. So anyway, they did that, and then did some other work. And we left it at that for a while, and she was a great boat. She continued to be a great boat. But at some point, I realized that I'd love to see what would happen if we put a carbon fiber mast in. That was in 1994, actually 1993 that we decided. So Joel White was very interested in that idea because he wanted to see how it could work. It was, so carbon fiber was just coming on, and spars were, people were just starting to think about this idea. I was in a position where I could make the investment and basically test the principle out. And so he redesigned the rig. I think he added about 100 square feet to the rig, made it several feet taller, added a little more ballast below. But there was some inside ballast. We put it all outside. It was a cast iron ballast keel. We changed it to an all lead outside ballast keel. The combination left the boat much more able to carry wholesale in a rising breeze. I could wait longer to reef. She was stiffer. She would pitch much less in a head sea. All these things that anybody thinking about the engineering of it would know. Her righting moment, her heeling moment, all the the weight aloft, all of that was affected by this decision. And so, well, I'm an aesthetic guy, and I want this mast to look like spruce. So I asked John Sheehan, whom I knew could do graining on wood of anything. He could do graining on any surface and make it look like the thing he's replicating. So I asked him to paint spruce grain onto this carbon fiber mast, and he did. And it was great. I mean, it looked great. And so, I mean, this is like, what could be better? I've got this lightweight mast with, internal halyards. I mean, everything that I'm not used to, but I love trying this out. And the boat is, I don't know if she definitely carries wholesale longer. So she's more upright. So she's faster like that. So anyway, it turned out to be a great thing. Well, it was for some people, it was like the ultimate betrayal to put a carbon fiber mast in a boat, especially a Concordia related boat, even if it's not a Concordia yawl, how dare you, and all that stuff. And I understood the purists. That's a viewpoint, and that's fine. Whatever. I just wanted to try this, and I was lucky enough to be able to. If I had a unique NG Herreshoff design, I would not be doing that. But I have this boat, of which there are a few others. This is a laboratory. I think that what I'm doing is what Bill Harris would want to do. I'm going back a ways. I'm thinking that Bill Harris, if he could have a lighter mast that looked good, he would think that would be great. So we did that. That same year, I had cedar splines glued into the seams on the top sides because I wanted to see if we could make the hull, which is single planked, a little easier to maintain. The paint breaks, the seam breaks. They weren't bad. I keep her, I hauled her late, launched her early, kept her in a building that was, had moisture in it. But I just wanted to see if we could make this work because I want the boat to be more easily maintained because we're all facing the challenge of time. So that turned out to be really good. I don't think I painted the top sides. I mean, it was a long time. It was more than 5 years at first. Well, that was unheard of. I mean, I might be able to get away with not painting it every other year, but if you almost can't help it if the seams are showing like that. So,
what paint system did you use, John?
Just regular. Well, that's not true. I was going to say just regular paint, but there was a coating system. There was an Interlux coating system, kind of a. Now I can't remember the number of it, but it was an international paint system. Because we had now a relatively stable hull, we could try this. So there was a little bit of Peter Connery, who does painting down in Rhode Island. I grew up here. Very, very good painter. Very good coatings guy. He applied this undercoat, and he would remember, and I would not, sadly. But there was a base coat that was stable. So it was as if, we were expecting. It was as if we'd cold molded a couple of layers of veneer over the hull. we didn't do that, but I'm saying that this was approaching that. So whatever we would do to stabilize that surface is what we wanted to be able to provide. It's not as, but and then we could paint the surface with anything, which we've done.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I wish we could show a photo of her here too.
Yeah.
I don't have one in the stream, but I do have.
Oh, look! Do you see what Dave Clark said? Are you there, Matt? I see. I don't know if anybody can hear me. Dave Clark.
Hi, sorry. Yep, you can be heard. I was closing a photo and I closed myself by accident.
That's
new guy. Sorry.
So understandable to me. I just have to know. Dave Clark says, "My life is this man's fault." Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I've heard this many times. I have heard this many times. So I apologize, and you're welcome. So I do know this feeling. My life is my fault too, and mostly it's been great, but not every minute.
So here are two photos. This is pre-dress code, as you said, and WoodenBoat has a very strict dress code now.
Yeah, right. As we know, yeah, right.
But we talked a little about the image on the right with Tim and our trip to Tasmania last year. But Tim has been reading your editorials for many years, and well, that's all I'll say. This is your story, not mine.
Okay, yeah. So well, just first on the dress code. I mean, there were so many years when I looked exactly like that, with all that hair, all that beard, all the t-shirts, the WoodenBoat painters hats. They were so cool. They were just, I mean, all these products that we were, that we wanted to try to put out there because in support of people who were supporting their boats. I mean, that was basically what it was about. All right, enough about dress code, which we've never had and never will. But if there was one, it was like that was it right there. Tim Phillips. It just so as you know, because we were there together, we were in Hobart for the Hobart, Australia WoodenBoat Festival last year, and there's Tim, this great boat builder, great sailor, amazing guy, like a man's man, rugged as can be, and any guy would want to look like him, and you can see I don't. But the thing about it is, he said to me when we first, as I never met him, I just knew of him, like a lot of readers who might have known of me. Anyway, so we're just talking. He said, John, he said, I used to just love your editorials because they were so heartfelt. And, I started to tear up because that, I know that I ended up being heartfelt there in those editorials. And I'm still, I mean, that's just basically who I am. I can't help it. I try to be businesslike, but it doesn't last long. And just to hear that from someone who had read it decades ago and, would think to remark on it when, God, I love your editorials, Matt. I love what's happening now. I love what you're doing with the magazine. I love what's happening with this company. The people here are amazing. But to have somebody call forth a time when I was writing those editorials was, I mean, even now.
And 3 decades on. And
yeah. It was incredibly moving for me. Just that he would say that, because I mean, I mean, he's just like, Arr. I mean, he's an R kind of guy, and that's who he is, and he's totally lovable and admirable. But you don't expect him to say, "I just loved how heartfelt your writing was," and it was just amazing for me. So,
and that's the magic of it, and thank you, John.
You're so welcome. Thank you. God, this is is this over? Is that what's happening here?
Well, we don't have to be. I mean, this is fun. We can keep going as long as you want.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not constrained by broadcast television.
Right. Yeah. We don't have to break for the next episode.
Oh, exactly.
Right. So, Matt, I want to ask you about your headphones because I know that there's a geek factor there. And so, tell us about those.
Well, I was going for street cred with them. I
Yeah.
thought, well, and I was advised to wear them to cut down on echo, but and maybe a little street cred. And my family has told me I look geeky in them,
You're
and
big.
I couldn't cave to that.
Exactly.
So I had to wear them today. But they're actually really cool. They are wooden. Whoops. And
There
they
you
say Fairliner on them.
Yeah.
And they are, I believe, made from some of the wood in this boat, which is a Fairliner torpedo, which we published an article about several years ago.
Oh my God.
And several months after that article came out, the owner of this boat, Jon Wilson, sent me this pair of headphones unannounced, which he had been making them, been custom making them, and wanted me to have a pair. And that's it. They're just they're wonderful, and geeky or not.
They're very geeky.
Yeah.
They're very geeky, but
Thank
it's
you.
important. It is important for us to know that that there's a wooden boat. They are trimmed in wood in just the right way, and that isn't that an amazing boat? I mean
It is. Yeah.
like that. I mean, this is the privilege of this work, isn't it? That we get to we get to share stories like that. This is for me as I was not to sorry to get off you, but what I want to say is I realized that all I really wanted was to make sure that people's stories got to be shared in the magazine. That was all I wanted. I wanted us all to be learning from what people were doing. And I just love it that continues to be the mission, that we continue to learn from what people are doing in deeply passionate ways. I just think it's so cool. So
Well, there's a great sequel to this one. I had a note from Jon Wilson recently, the owner of this boat, and there's a new one recently launched in New Zealand, inspired by that article.
wow.
And he said it's beautifully built, and we're corresponding now about some kind of coverage of that.
Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. Now, speaking of New Zealand, you were there last year after Tasmania, and you connected. You were in Picton and connected with an interesting boat builder there. And I believe that connection was made either by a Nutshell Pram or a shellback dinghy that you saw in a dinghy rack. Do I have that correct?
No, that was
no.
different. No, it's so interesting that you remember this. That
Now
was
I'm making stuff up.
Yeah. No, you're not. It's a true. There was a Nutshell in Iraq in a
Okay.
dinghy rack. It was in Kettering,
Okay.
down where John and Dee Deegan are. We saw it when we were down there. The Picton story. Sherry and I had flown from Hobart to Wellington and then taken the ferry from Wellington, New Zealand, North Island, down to Picton at the north end of the South Island, where we were going to just enjoy some time off together, which was really totally fun. But as is my want, I said, there's a marina. Let's just go there just first. Before we get on the road, let's just check this marina out, which I love to do. I just want to see how many wooden boats are there, which I love to do. So we get there. We're starting to walk around the docks, and there are a lot of wonderful boats there. And in comes this modern power fishing boat, sport fishing, cruising. He charters it for, as we later learned. Anyway, so he comes in and he maneuvers, backs into his slip at the marina. And, I'm just kind of interested in the boat. The people are nice. Sherry sneezes out loud. And somebody aboard the boat says, "Bless you." And it's nothing.
That's a
something
great opener.
Yeah. So that gives me the chance to say, tell me about your boat, because it's not clear that it's wood. It's just, it could be, but it's not clear to me because it's a modern boat. You've seen it. When I get up to it, I can begin to see that it is. But he tells me that his father designed it, and he's incredibly friendly and enthusiastic. And when he hears that I'm from Wooden Boat, he goes, "Oh my God, I've been corresponding with you guys, and I hope you'll do an article on this boat because it's my dad's last design, and I built it, with love." And I mean, it's this kind of we see these kinds of stories all the time, and love the people and love the boats. So Grant Orchard is his name. Turns out he charters it, fishes it, charter fishes the boat, and loves it. Loved his father. His father was one of those builders in New Zealand. Grant Orchard is younger than I am. You know, if he's 55, I'll be surprised. His father was a builder of wooden boats on the beach in the harbor at Picton. That's how long that beach boat building and big boats tradition went on in that part of New Zealand. And you know, now real estate has made beach boat building not the thing, but you know, but it happened that way. And so the tradition just totally captivated me. And as you know, I brought back some information and pictures, but Grant is an amazing guy. The boat is a great boat. The tradition and history is amazing. So, I mean, it's irresistible for me.
Thanks.
Yeah. So.
Well, John, thank you for sharing all of this today.
Well, this has really been fun. You know, it makes me think that this, and people have said this for years, including lots of people who work here, we should be trying to talk about, all of us, talk about our experiences of the history of this place, because it is an amazing, I mean, people have grown up here. There are 2 generations working in this building.
Yes, right.
Even now in COVID with constraints, where we're designated an essential business because of what we do and because of the space we have here. But, you know, there's a mother and daughter that work here. The mom worked here when she was young, and the daughter started working here when she was young. And, you know, here they are, 2 generations. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, all right, Matt.
Yeah, well,
thank you so much. I don't know what happened on the chat side. If anybody asked anything, all I could do was concentrate on trying to answer and address your questions. I hope I didn't overdo it.
Oh, not at all. No, you did very well, and thanks. This has been fascinating.
You're welcome.
And we're gonna. I'm sorry.
Thanks for doing this. I loved what you did with Evelyn Ansell last week, and she's a hard act to follow, but it's an honor also to follow her. So. You know.
And next week we have Alec Brainerd coming on, and
very cool.
Yeah, so we're going to begin that one with a chat in his office, and then he'll walk around the shop and show us some projects.
Oh, excellent!
We tested the Wi-Fi coverage the other day, and I think we'll have a consistent signal for that. So tune in next Wednesday at 3:30 and watch for an announcement.
That's great. And then do these get archived?
These get archived, so these will live on the Facebook page, the WoodenBoat Facebook page, but they become harder to dig up as they get buried by more current posts. Right. However, we will be moving the recordings to our YouTube channel too.
Okay, great.
So keep an eye on that.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for honoring me with this. I do feel honored to be, you know, here with you. I'm grateful for what you do, for the tradition that you are carrying on so beautifully, so ably. So thank you.
Thank you, John, and hope to see you soon.
All right. Okay.
Take care. In person. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right, Matt. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. And bye, everyone. Thank you.
Okay.